Hey there guys, welcome back to another video. So today I'm going to focus on common oil and vacuum leaks that I personally have come across on the M52tu series and M54 series engine. They are both very similar platforms sharing the same engine block and at times the same cylinder head casting. However, as you guys know, there are internal differences between the various platforms. Everything I'm about to share with you are things that I've learned personally within the last 4 years, going on 5 years of E46 ownership, and from working on E46s and this engine alike. So let's get right into it. Okay, so here in front of us we have an M52 TUB28 engine, which is found in the 328 model E46s. Although, judging by appearance, when it comes to these engines and an M54, it's really hard to tell them apart because they're basically identical, like I was saying earlier. However, there are a couple of vacuum differences, but our current discussion is oil leaks, and the differences are irrelevant because all these gaskets will leak amongst the M52tu series platforms, the M54, and even the M56, which is a SULIF compliant engine. All these gaskets I'm about to tell you about, they all comply with these engines. So we're discussing cars from 320s, 323s, 328s, 325s, and 330s. The 320 is not available in the US, but I like to include it because I do have some UK viewers and other viewers from different countries. So the first and well-known oil leak amongst those platforms is going to be the valve cover gasket. It's very well documented. It's well known. It tends to leak in higher mileage all over the place. But this engine, on the stand right now, I have it tilted this way on purpose because this is how it is sitting in the engine bay typically. And usually you'll see excessive smoke after a drive arising within the engine bay, and you'll even smell it through your cabin vents. Because oil, once it starts leaking from this gasket, will drip down to the exhaust manifolds and just smoke. And this back corner leaks a lot too when it's not seated properly or when the gasket itself is bad. Now, another big thing is when it comes to oil leaks, let's say you replace this gasket and it's still leaking. That is more than likely going to be the valve cover itself, because in higher mileage they tend to warp and crack. Now, the warping, I have a good example of from this engine. This valve cover is warped. You can see how it is exposing excessive amount of gasket right here. So this cover is warped. Typically, I don't really see them leaking that much, even when they're warped like this. However, it is more common oftentimes than not that it will leak, even with a new gasket in here. Whenever they get to this age, usually they begin cracking as well. But that's more of a discussion for vacuum leaks, but will also, obviously be adequate with oil leaking if it's cracked. But yes, at higher mileage, the valve cover as a whole may need replaced due to oil leaks. Now we're going to work our way down. So we covered the valve cover gasket, most common. I also like talking about oil leaks that not other people cover that often. Another common oil leak in higher mileage engines, and often is included in discussions, is going to be the camshaft position sensor for the intake. You can see it hiding right there, behind. It's hidden by the Vano solenoid. If you see fresh oil or puddling down there on that little ledge, that is because either it's the valve cover gasket leaking or the O-ring on that sensor is bad. And I have one pulled out right here. The O-ring is serviceable and replaceable. So you see it's right here, and they do leak. They don't leak a lot, but they do seep, and they do cause some oil loss. Now, thankfully, your local dealership usually has these in stock from my experience, and they're actually very cheap, anywhere from $1.50 to $4, depending on your location. I think I got mine for like $2 at the most from my local dealership. But your prices will vary depending on your location and the price of the price market, I'm guessing. But yeah, cheap, easy to fix. You don't have to replace the whole sensor, just the O-ring. It will leak. A little blurry, but you have an idea. Now, the next oil leak in the same location, or the same area pretty much, within this height region, is going to be this Vanos hose. Not only will it leak at the crush washers, but more commonly at the crimp point for the hose. The hose will begin getting damp. It doesn't really spray or anything like that. It just gets really damp. This is a very high pressure hose, at times that is, because it regulates your Vanos system, which is your variable valve timing, which is this complete assembly in front of the engine. But that hose is common to leak at both crimp points, whether it be here or down behind, right there. You can kind of see it, and that one is really damp. This point down here. So far we have the valve cover gasket, intake camshaft O-ring, and the Vanos hose. Moving on to this side of the engine, another not very much spoken of is going to be this camshaft sensor. Same thing, the O-ring on it goes bad. I imagine it's also serviceable. I have yet to replace one, but they do seep sometimes. Another common one at higher mileage will actually be the crush washer for your timing chain tensioner. This engine's very dirty, but if it was wiped off, you would see that this mates against the timing cover or the cylinder head, I believe. Yeah, it's the cylinder head. There's a crush washer that seals it, and I've seen them seep over time. There are also going to be another common oil leak that's also very well documented and well heard of is the oil filter housing gasket. The oil filter housing is this entire assembly right here that mates to the side of the engine block via O-ring style gasket. And its telltale sign if it's leaking is going to be these honeycombs in the engine block here will have puddles of oil in them. As you can see, this one's been leaking quite for a while now. Now we're moving on to more common oil leaks would be the front main seal at higher mileage will begin seeping. Typically, not so often do I see the timing cover gasket leaking. The gasket sealing it to the engine block is actually a metal style, and they hardly ever leak. You can actually see it hanging out right here. It's usually the rubber style seals, so the front main will leak. If you go replace that, this bolt right here is actually very tight. It's torqued over 300 foot-pounds. Can be a challenge to break loose. The typical impact gun will not take it off. You would need, I would presume, a 3/4 inch impact gun to actually remove it. If you don't have access to that, I would remove it with like I've done before, with a breaker bar and a large cheater bar attached to it. In my case, it was the leg of an engine hoist. That's how tight it was. But yeah, if you ever need to service that, it's easy enough to get this off and replace it. If you want to remove the timing cover, just be careful because it could be hard to reseal it where it meets the cylinder head. That's always a challenge because it compresses against it. Now let's move on to the back of the engine where we also have the rear main seal, another common leak point. BMW did resort to installing Viton or Viton, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, seals back here that last a lot longer. It is the seal that seals the crankshaft at the rear. It's kind of hard for me to see because it's on the stand, but right in there, it's black. And there's also another gasket which seals the rear main seal housing to the engine block with this metal style. Once again, they hardly ever, I've never seen one leak, but here it is sticking out. They hardly ever leak. It's always like I said, the rubber style seals. I usually see those not leaking until like even 150,000 miles plus at times. They last quite a long time. Since we're down here, let's discuss also the oil pan gasket. As you can see, this engine does need cleaned. I'm going to get to that. But this oil pan gasket, which mates the oil pan to the engine block, let's go to this side where it's actually damp so you can see. Like right here, right where the oil pan seats against the engine block, there is a gasket in here. It is a rubber and metal type, and they're also known to leak at higher mileage. Nothing compared to the newer BMWs like the N51, M52, and M54. They leak as low as 75 to 80,000. These gaskets hold up over 100,000 typically, so they last a lot longer than the newer BMWs. Other oil leaks sometimes, not often, but I do see the crankshaft position sensor get damp around it. Once again, it's just an O-ring sealing it. But this one's pretty well dry. It hasn't leaked at all. Not a very common one, but it does happen. Other oil leaks can also possibly be the CCV system. This does not follow through with M56 engines. They have an integrated valve cover system that help regulate the crankcase pressure. So the CCV is not regarding the M56 engine. But yeah, it will leak oil if the return hose fails and stuff like that. But the CCV is more of a vacuum leak issue, so we'll get to that in a few moments here. Other spots for oils to leak. Let me think here. I think that's pretty much all of them when it comes to these engines, as far as common ones go. I always like discussing those camshaft sensors because that's not commonly brought up. All right, so let's move on to vacuum leaks then. So when it comes to vacuum leaks on this platform, one of the most common issues when it comes to vacuum leaks are failed CCV components, including this this hose here going to the valve cover because it gets old and brittle, like I just cracked in my hand. If you hear it cracking, yeah, listen to that. This one's about to break, so you can see it's actually splitting right there. So that's a common vacuum leak. Anything associated with it, including this main vacuum hose here, This piece here they call the vacuum distribution rail. It's also for its primary purpose is to getting adequate vacuum to the CCV, so you're getting equal distribution between all runners. So you have this hose here that could potentially crack. This hose is a big one because it goes up underneath the intake manifold at a crazy angle. See it right there? It'll split where it bends. And also this oil return pipe, it will get old and brittle. Not so much brittle. This one's more of a rubber hose. It won't get really brittle. It will just get more of like a cracking from oil contamination over the years. Because oil breaks down rubbers and silicates slowly over time. So you'll typically see this leaking oil and at times vacuum. And also another vacuum leak when it comes to this engine. This one being an M52tu series engine found in the 323s and 328s. The ones in the US, that is. You're going to have this hose right here. This vacuum supply runs back, follows the vacuum, follows this little vacuum rail, which is attached to the fuel rail. Comes back. This right here could also be a vacuum leak point. This brittle rubber hose here comes back into a hard line. Now this would go underneath the car, running to a 3.2 valve, which houses the fuel pressure regulator. That is mainly, I only see those on US models. As far as like Australia and UK, you guys will have the fuel rail for these engines that actually house the FPR up here. The fuel pressure regulator will be mounted to it right here. So this may not be applicable sorry, to you guys in UK and Australia and all that stuff. Here in the US though, we have this hose. It runs down the CCV at this port right here. You can see it's actually broken. This little port right here. The M54 cars, 325s and 330s, this will simply be capped off. But as you can see on this engine, it's utilized for the vacuum running down to the FPR assembly underneath the car. Another common area to break. You see this one broke. I was messing with it and it broke in my hand yesterday. That's how brittle they get. Another common vacuum leak. Let's go back to the valve cover again. Like earlier, how I showed you it was warped. Like I said, they also crack. So if you replace the gasket on this, it's still leaking. 9 times out of 10, it's from warpage and cracking. I typically see them warping on the corners, like I showed you. And the cracking around almost every bolt be expected in higher mileage cars. Specifically this one back here, I see a lot cracking. This back corner. And I'll actually even see chunks missing from the bolts here underneath the valve cover. So any high mileage car I get in with this engine or similar platforms, if they're here for a valve cover gasket, I always pull off the valve cover and use an LED flashlight and examine the very bottom of the valve cover. You'll typically see cracking if that's the case and chunks missing like I just said. So you can buy a whole new valve cover. It is the largest cover on this engine, so be expected to have issues with it at higher mileage, whether it be warping, cracking, or just overall leaking. Also, we're going to have problems with the oil fill cap here. The seal on it will wear out over age, and it will not seal. And currently, I'm going to have to answer. I just got a message from a friend. He just asked me what a EML light means. So I'm going to reply to him real quick, and I'll be right back discussing further vacuum leaks. Alrighty, I am back. Okay, I got my friend all answered, so he's happy. I actually have to get an order ready for him. Because if you guys don't know, I sell parts, so I'll be getting his order ready here soon after this video. Anyway, moving back on to vacuum leaks. Right where I left off was the oil fill cap. Like I said, it will typically leak vacuum at higher mileage because it wears out from, you know, always being open and shut and all that from adding oil. So yeah, another one that's not thought of often is this oil cap will leak vacuum. And then we have the DISA valve, which goes right here. This one is currently out of the engine. However, I have one right here. The DISA valve seals with a integrated O-ring that's built onto it. It's usually in the color red, and it will go bad over years. As you'll see, this one has a green O-ring, meaning it's been replaced. Actually, here's the DISA valve as a whole. I just removed it. As you can see, this red stuff on here, that's usually the color of the O-ring on here. Whenever they go bad, you have to scrape them out because they're actually, like I said, they're integrated. So it can be a little time consuming. I usually use a couple of pick tools and a razor blade to remove the gasket. And then you can simply buy a new O-ring to put on like this person did. I'm not sure how long ago it was done, but it has been done because it was leaking. Another common leak point for vacuum. Another very common leak point for vacuum are going to be these intake boots right here. I typically see them leaking at these joints. This one going to the ICV, idle control valve. It'll actually split the whole way open right here, whether it be on this side or that side where the hose is bending. I also see them split nearly in half at this joint from flexing over the years, you know, because engine vibration and just heat cycles and all that. But yeah, I see these all the time nearly ripped in half just from being worn out. Another common leak point. Now, my personal favorite place to check for vacuum leaks, because 9 times out of 10, they are indeed bad, is going to be the very back of the intake manifold. Now, with the engine in the car, it's actually very hard to get to unless you have small hands and are able to remove this shield, which actually isn't bad to do. We'll be looking at back here are these vacuum ports. Very common spot check for any kind of vacuum leaks. So this, once again, this being an M52tu series engine found in 323 and 328, this port will be used for a 90-degree elbow part of the evap system. It'll simply plug on there. Check that, see if it's loose or cracked. Typically, they don't crack, not the elbow itself, but they do get kind of worn out. However, this hose right here is a big one. This goes into a one-way check valve, which plumbs into right here, but since the hoses are so old, it simply slipped right out. It goes like this. And this runs, I'm just going to let this go. This runs to your secondary air pump solenoid right here. Now, there's a total of 3 small hoses back here. You have 1, 2, get this camera to focus, we can, 2, and then 3. These ones crack all the time and will cause vacuum leaks that are hard to find unless you're smoke testing or have small hands and are good at finding vacuum leaks. This one, leaving the solenoid, goes the whole way around the engine. It connects into a hard line like this, and it runs up into this rubber hose, and then connects to the secondary air pump valve right here. And then there's a hose leaving this going to the solenoid, the big pump in the engine bay. So this hose will crack, the hard line gets brittle, will break in your hand sometimes when you're replacing the valve cover, or the valve cover gasket, or the valve cover itself. And then you also follow it back, and this guy will be cracked. And a good example is this right here. She's pretty well cracked up, as you can see. So this hose is bad. It's going to be leaking here very soon. But I think I'm getting rid of all this because I'm going to be using a different intake manifold on this engine. But these 3 hoses are crucial and always need checking for any kind of cracking or anything. Now, on the M54 cars, 325s and 330s, some of them have a exhaust flap and the muffler to regulate cold starts. I'm guessing for exhaust velocity reasons, exhaust gas velocity. So they'll have a big vacuum canister down here, and one of these ports will feed it. But if not, it'll simply be capped, like how this one is. And always check these caps, because on M54, this one's usually capped, and sometimes I see them split. If I'm correct, this cap right here will be feeding that big vacuum canister if you have it. So always check these 3 ports. They're crucial. I always see hoses broken back here. Other common vacuum leaks are going to include, well, actually not. Well, let's discuss uncommon vacuum leaks. We'll be focusing on the intake manifold gaskets. I hardly ever see them leak, believe it or not, even really high mileage. It's obviously the gasket that mates the intake manifold to the cylinder head. It's a red style. I think the gaskets come in a set of 2, so there's going to be 3 runners on each gasket that simply go into the manifold, you put it back on. Once again, not a very common vacuum leak. There are also O-rings that seal up this vacuum distribution rail. They don't leak typically at all, as far as I've seen vacuum-wise. However, they do leak in people who turbo their cars. They do leak a boost. But yeah, overall, when it comes to bone stock, naturally aspirated engine, these hardly will ever leak any kind of vacuum. It's typically all the other stuff, the CCV, the valve cover, those hoses at the back, the throttle boots, the DISA, things like that. So basically anything, and also mentioned earlier was this dipstick O-ring. If it does go bad, it will also be a vacuum leak, since this engine from the factory, like I said, is totally vacuum sealed from the CCV system, because for emissions reasons. Basically, any of your modern day fuel-injected internal combustion engine will be a totally sealed unit for emissions reasons. So theoretically, any kind of gasket leaking on this engine would technically be a vacuum leak, but they're often not a significant enough leak to actually throw the trouble code. But yes, this will also be a vacuum leak, believe it or not, because it's the bottom of the crankcase. Like I said, the engine as a whole is still under vacuum, so this would also be a vacuum leak technically if this O-ring does go bad. Not so much a vacuum leak, but an issue I always see, especially on 325s and 330s, is this brake booster hose. This one's been cut for simplicity reasons when they took this engine out of the car. There's a brake booster hose. Right here it is. So I guess this would be like a little bonus information for you. it typically runs into what's called a suction jet pump, which is this right here. And then the hose leaving this and going into the engine bay. Let's see if I can get a shot. This car's a 323, but the same thing goes for, really can't see this one that well. On 325s and 330s, like this one out here, let's check it out. Right here, I have it tucked down, but it runs up through that cover, and it plugs in right here. I sometimes see these hoses collapsed out here. Like this one's starting to do it right now. See how that hose is it's not the correct shape, it's actually beginning to collapse. I see that a lot on the 325s and 330s. That may cause braking issues if it were to collapse totally. I just find that an odd one to happen. I'm not sure if it's because the suction jet pump, it's a one-way check valve, if it shuts and opens all the time. But it's just something I took note of. I always see that hose collapse on the 325s and 330s. So I guess this is just a little bonus information. I don't think it really causes any problems with lean codes or anything like that. The P01, the P0171 and P0174. I've never seen that hose related to those codes, but still, just something for you guys to check, because you can buy that hose. It's a common failure item, like I keep saying. Another non-common area to leak would be the throttle body gasket. Throttle body is, obviously right here. It's a fairly large unit because it's a fly-by-wire setup. The earlier E46s were fly-by-wire and throttle cable, like this one here. And I rarely ever see the gasket for it leak. So that's really nothing to be too concerned over. Once again, here's one of those hoses at these ports, split right open. So definitely check these guys out. Definitely do that. Okay, guys, I think that covers just about everything when it comes to common vacuum and oil leaks for these cars. If you have any questions about these engines or these platforms in general, the E46, don't hesitate to comment below and ask me. I'll be right there to answer you. What I really kind of find odd is, it's kind of expected, is my views went way down since I left the turbo scene. I know, it's really popular to see and really popular to watch as turbo videos, but for this car's application, which is going to be autocross and circuit racing, I think naturally aspirated is the way to go. And this build, this time around, is a whole new level. It's nowhere near the 2019 and 2020 version of myself. This 2021 Tyler is just going all out and redoing the whole car, and I feel like a lot of people are missing out on that. We've, painted the engine bay, doing a race interior, a mild race interior, fuel cell, custom OEM dash cluster, just things like that, and I just feel like you guys are missing out because my work this time around is way, way different. And myself as a person has changed quite a bit. I'm a lot more motivated to get things done this time around, and overall just very happy with my progress. So I'm sure the views will return once I keep doing content like this and stuff like that. So I've been meaning to do a video like that for a while when it comes to common issues with the engines and all that stuff. And then also, if you guys need any kind of parts, just let me know. I do ship the same, if not very next day, to all the lower 48 United States. I currently do not ship overseas, so I apologize for that. Not until I get deals with USPS, FedEx, and DHL. For now, I only ship to lower US 48. So if you guys need any parts, get a hold of me. I'll hook you up. Just comment below if you need anything, and I'll link you with my Facebook, Instagram, or anything else. All payments are approved through. I accept PayPal through my business PayPal. I have great reviews on there. I also sell on eBay, so be on the lookout for that. However, the eBay costs are a lot higher because eBay has fees, as you know. So if you just want to deal with me personally, it's a lot cheaper. Just let me know. I do not, when it comes to bigger items like entire doors, front bumpers, rear bumpers, engines, transmissions, those do not ship currently because freight is pretty expensive. I do not have deals with people like that yet. But when it comes to just random small oddities you may need, I'll ship them. And I also supply pictures of the packaging and tracking numbers with receipt purchase. So just let me know. But for now, I'm going to go back home, get my place cleaned up because there's a tenant coming to look at it tomorrow, or supposed to be, because my new house should be ready within the next couple of weeks, I'm hoping. So I'll be a lot closer to the shop, be able to get a lot more footage for you. Then I have to come back here and get my buddy's order ready. He needs a lot of things for his newly acquired 323i, which is a great commuter car. That's what he got it for. He needs just random things, from the sunroof cassette to a front turn signal, random fasteners, small body pieces, things like that. So that's what I'm here for. I love the parts business, so if you guys need anything, just let me know for sure. And So yeah, actually, I think that's gonna be everything for today. I'm gonna head out of here. So until next time, I'll see you guys later, and have yourselves a good one.